Everything is anything or everything that can go wrong will go wrong.
Oh, you're not.
What is Murphy's Law? Like, do you know the specifics?
Hello everyone, welcome back to Everyday with Zach Jose. I'm your host, Zach Jose, and today on the podcast we have a recurring guest. Do you want to introduce yourself for the world and everyone to hear?
Hello, world, and everyone to hear. I am Mason. It is me. I am back. I have returned in all of my glory, and yeah, I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, Mr. Zach Jose? Just thought I'd ask.
I'm doing pretty well myself.
Hey, good. Yeah, thanks for having me back on. It's a good time.
Yeah, of course. So, on my podcast, recently, every time I've had a guest on, I've asked them the question, what is something you could talk about nonstop with like little to no preparation? What is something that you're passionate about, basically? And so, today with Mason, we're going to be talking about world building.
Gotcha. So, world building... That's right. World building is, it's a fun, nerdy thing that people like me do. I say people like me as if I know other people that do it. I don't. It's something I just do as a hobby. But world building is essentially creating, worlds that don't exist. And in order to do that, you have to do like really cool stuff, like research, like a lot of research. Like Wikipedia is a great resource for it. This is a terrible start to things, but essentially it's creating a setting for stories to be designed. So, I mean, like Lord of the Rings is a classic example. Middle Earth, everybody knows Middle Earth. There's Hogwarts for Harry Potter, where much of the story takes place. And all of these places are locations or countries or continents or like entire planets that somebody at some point sat down and literally wrote out and designed every single aspect of the world that pertained to the story they were making. So the nice thing about world building that I like is you can be very surface level with it, or you can get down to like very, very detailed bare bones of how this world is designed, what its people are like, and it can get into pure craziness, but it's all up to how much work you want to put into it. So yeah, world building is something that I started doing because when I was younger, I always liked watching Lord of the Rings. I always loved Middle Earth, just as one example. I read a lot of sci-fi books, and like my dad, when I was younger, would read books to us as well. And so I was always infatuated with the idea of worlds that were different from ours, and just being able to explore them and learn about them. And I always found that fascinating because I'm a creative, imaginative person, at least I like to think.
So, what's your experience with world building?
An awful lot of sitting in front of a laptop, reading. Just reading. The actual... Because, I mean, I've world built a couple of... Or I'm in the process of building a couple of worlds. For years I've been working on, I just refer to it as the story because I don't really know what it's gonna all come out to in a number of years, but I've been designing one particular world for quite some time, and then my older brother is making a kind of like Magic the Gathering-esque card game, and he asked me to do some world building for that. And then another part of world building that I do is also in Dungeons and Dragons, because as a DM, I like to create my own campaigns. So there's just an awful lot of the experience is just an awful lot of research, something that I personally really enjoy, but I know it's not for everyone. Not everyone likes to sit there and read about stuff. So I mean, just to start off with the main one, my experience with that all began, I mean, the experience of any author with world building really begins with what are you trying to create? Just asking yourself questions such as that, like, do I want to make, do I want to like write a book about this? Am I just doing this for fun? Is this like a character-centric story, or is this going to be one about a particular ideology or whatever? For the story that I've been working on, I started by, like, just as an example, I started by researching planets, because one thing that always interested me is, like, planet Earth, for gosh sakes. Like, that is the best, most real-world example of world building that we have. I mean, we live in it and interact with it every day, and it's the most real example of this fleshed out, very yeah, it's a real life is about as real as it gets. And so one thing that always interested me was, like, why is the Earth as habitable as it is? Like, does it have to do with its distance from the sun? Does it have to do with little things like its axial tilt? And so probably about 2.5 years ago, I started just researching stuff about planets, because it was something that I thought was interesting, and I sunk hours into it. And I learned about axial tilt, I learned about the seasons, I learned about rotation speed, I learned about distance from the sun, just how all these different factors come together to form a planet, and one that you can have different life forms on. And so once you kind of start getting to that, you start experimenting with it. And it's like, all right, so why are the mountains on Earth as tall as they are? And then it's like, oh, that has to do with gravitational pull. It's like, well, what if in this world I wanted to create, what if I wanted the mountains to be like twice as tall? What would that look like? And so then you look up things like gravitational constants, and it's like, okay, so the gravitational constant on this planet would be X, meaning that variation in what's the word? Altitude, I think, is the right word, but that's like when you're up in the air, right? Elevation. Yeah. Elevation. Differences in elevation would be greatly increased. So, like, different ravines and gorges, like underwater, would be a lot deeper, and mountains. And on the other hand, mountains would be a lot taller. It's like, all right, so what would happen if I increased things like the rotation speed of this planet? Well, the rotation speed of Earth chalks up to probably about 23 point, I think it's like 7 or 8 hours for it to go through a full rotation, which, if you break that down, that's like tens of thousands of seconds. And that's our day. Like, that's little things like this you don't really think about that have a lot of science and different interesting things to them. And I'm like, all right, what happens if I increase the rotation speed? So I just start playing around with numbers, and because it's not like, you're just messing around with it. And oftentimes when I was designing this planet, I just like picked random numbers or just punched in random numbers, and if I got a result I liked, boom, I'll take it. So me messing around with like spin speed, just as one example, the rotation of this planet means that a day is 22.1 hours, but because of the higher rotation speed, that means that wind speed potential is going to be a lot greater. If a thunderstorm came rolling through, it's going to be, for that reason, a lot bigger and a lot more destructive. And the wind speed's also going to affect the ecology of like trees, because if you think about it, if the wind was so strong that it blew all the leaves off the trees would die. So just all these different, you just change one factor in one spot, and it just creates this very fascinating, for me at least, ripple effect that impacts every single aspect you can think of. So those are just a few examples, but after just months of researching these different things and nailing down uh, nailing down different numbers that I wanted. Like I want an axial tilt to be this. I already discussed spin speed. Um, like this is how large the temperate zones are going to be, because then at that point I can start mapping things out. Because like world building may be fun when you're researching, but like the important part of it is actually like creating fun little diagrams, or at least for you don't need to create the diagrams. Like the whole point of world building is you can approach it from however you want. And I liked creating funny little maps of the different wind cycles, of the currents. I designed the continents. I looked into tectonic plates, and just all of these things help me create mountains, know where to place different hills, where would forests grow, where would rivers flow. And because of things like this, I could eventually determine where, if I was to put people here, where would they build cities? Where would they put their farms? Where would they do this, that, and the other thing? Where, like, what area would create a nice natural land barrier between one nation and another? And just every single thing you work on just compounds on itself, so that before you know it, you have this, you have not, maybe realistic's a bit of a stretch, but you have a very fleshed out, well designed world. And and why that pertains to a story is it's little, like, I mean, Zach, you've watched movies, you read books. I mean, what do you think, like, when it comes to world building, what do you think is the most, what do you think's one of the most important things when you're watching a book or reading a movie about the world? Like, what makes you want to care about the world? What's interesting about it?
How different it is from your own world, I think.
Okay, that's a pretty good one. So, like, what its unique attributes and all that? Because I mean, like, Middle Earth is pretty cool, because, like, I don't know if you ever looked at a map of Middle Earth, but, like, the mountains just form these very nice lines, and just straight or slightly curved lines. And I mean, Mordor, for heaven's sakes, is just a big box and of mountains. I mean, like, there's little things like this that make your world quirky, and that's just how Tolkien designed it. But when it comes to, like, I think something that people don't really appreciate too much about world building is how central it is to liking a story. Because, I mean, I loved Lord of the Rings because the world felt real to me, but as you pointed out, it felt different. There was an aura of mystery to it. And when you're watching a movie, world building is super important, because if you don't establish why the setting is important, then it's super difficult to establish things like stakes. It's very difficult to establish things like characters, character motivations, character backgrounds. And world building is just one of those, in, like, if you want to be kind of poetic about it, like, world building is like an instrumental section of an orchestra. Like, it's very it's there in the background, but it's very, very important to the overall piece. And, like, that's always something I loved about it. So yeah, that's just a brief crash course of how I started. But yeah, that's basically it.
What are some of the, I know you've brushed upon, like, axial tilt and stuff, but what are some of the other, things that seem pretty insignificant, but are very, like, interestingly significant? Like, what are some things that you've discovered while researching world building?
That's great question. Honestly, the best part of world building, or at least the thing that really stuck out to me, was, like, because the real world's defined by facts. Like, the sun is always going to rise and set, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Like bears look like this, people look like this, wood looks like this, wood grows with trees, all sorts of, like, just random stuff like that. But, like, world building is cool because you create your own facts. You can take these fun little things called creative liberties, which also, I mean, as every aspect of world building does, has a lasting impact on everything. But that was the thing that I thought was really fun about it, because, I mean, well, here's just one example. Like, we talked about how different aspects of uh, like some particular worlds that we've like seen before in media and entertainment. Some of them have their own particular their own quirk, their own particular quirk to it. Like I mentioned the mountains for Lord of the Rings. Like those aren't realistic mountains necessarily,
Hmm.
but I mean they're just funny to look at because like Tolkien just went bam, line, let's put mountain ranges there. You know, it's fun stuff. And so one thing I toyed around with was like, hey, what if one key thing about creatures like natural creatures in this world is they have different bioluminescent things to them. Like just one random example that I can think of. At one point, I was designing a northern region, and I was designing the different creatures for it. And I was like, you know what if I had a variety of wolf that had speckles of fur that glowed blue? And it was like just it like mammals that produce their own light, bioluminescent light, like on their fur.
Yeah.
And because I mean, you see that with fish here, you see that with like algae and very small different microorganisms here. But like, what if animals did it? Like, what if that was a thing? And I was like, and so I was like, okay, let's toy with this a bit. So I ended up creating what I referred to as a dusk wolf, which was basically this. It was basically a wolf that hibernates in packs throughout most of the year, and when they come out of hibernation, how they hunt is basically it's very similar to zebras because like most animals see movement. They don't see with light like we do. In
Yeah.
the same way. So when that comes to zebras, that's why zebras have their stripes, because if they all run together, it all like if a lion or a leopard or something was trying to eat a zebra, it all blurs together and just confuses them. So I was like, all right, let's play around with this glowing wolf fur or whatever. Like they just have, if you had a bunch of wolves that just have these different unique speckles or stripes that glow at night, uh, with this dusk wolf species, then what if I had it be similar to zebras? When they go out hunting as a pack at night, they surround. Like, what if they just surrounded the creature they were hunting? Let's say it's a person. Let's say it's a deer, and they just start running circles around it. What would that look like to the animal? What would that look like to the person? It would
Interesting.
it would look like, and I just start visualizing, and like I'm getting hyped up already just thinking about it because I think this is cool. But like, if a person was standing in the middle of a forest and you were being attacked by a pack of these things, they would start running circles around you, and what would you see? You would just see all of these streaks of like blue, because that's the color I picked, blue light just circling around you, and you see their eyes, you see the speckles, and they're just running circles around you, confusing the crap out of you, scaring you, and then like one or two just start jumping out of the pack at a time to attack the creature that's in the middle. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And then immediately it's like, oh, I can make a scene out of this. What if I just put insert character A here?
Hmm.
Like, what if somebody was just walking through the forest tonight, got attacked by a pack of these things, and I just start visualizing, like, what would this look like? How would I describe this if I was to put it in a novel? How would I animate this if I was to make an animated something out of it? How would it look like in a live action movie? Like, and I'm a more visual person, so a lot of I mean, if that wasn't clear from like my approach to things, I like creating graphs, I like visualizing scenes, and that's normally what I end up doing for this. I'm like, what if I put somebody into a scene and they had to deal with this? What would that be like? What feelings would it create? And I love it. I think it's awesome. So just toying around with random facts like that. What if it all started with me asking, what if I had a species of mammal, or just what if the mammals in general just had glowing specks on their fur? How would that impact how they eat, how would that impact how they hunt, how would that change the world, how does me establishing this as a fact change things. And it's awesome. I love all of it. You know what is very interesting? You know what we
Tell
can't
me.
talk about? I'm sure you've watched, like, Zach Jose. You've watched Studio Ghibli films before, right? Like,
Yes.
like Studio Ghibli films, like, awesome, right?
Mm-hmm. Phenomenal.
What's phenomenal? That, like, if you want to, if, like, this is something I was looking into also because, as I said, world building's all about how you approach it. And obviously you can approach it from any direction, but, I mean, Studio Ghibli films does this interesting thing called soft world building. Like you've heard of hard magic systems and soft magic systems, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the same thing applies to world building because as I said, we're like it's all up to how you want to approach it and how that creates immersion for the reader, for whoever's watching it, that sort of thing. So, Studio Ghibli is awesome because while I mean everything I'm talking about, if you really boil it down, is hard world building. It has concrete rules. There's
Yeah.
consistency to it. Because my goal is to create realism. My goal is to eventually just have all of this information build up, so that if I was to make a story out of it, it would feel real and immersive to people, and they would interact with it in that way, the same way we do through books, the same way we do through movies. Studio Ghibli takes a different approach because I mean, obviously, what's a dang it, man, I'm just trying to name a few, but I mean, they're all very much like that. But I mean, Studio Ghibli is defined by its weird, wacky, mysterious atmosphere, and that like as opposed to hard world building, that's actually soft world building, because it doesn't really focus on rules or consistency. It's more about flexibility, a lot more imagination, and like the unknown. Like that's what it's built on.
Yeah.
You have weird spirits with funny looking masks. Uh, you have these giant, very fat witches with these very big noses, and
Always.
you have like weird flying dragons and like talking spirits. But I mean, like, it's totally possible to world build without world building. It's almost as if having like just putting in silly little things like that does all the world building for you, because you leave it up to the imagination of the reader. And that's why Studio Ghibli films, for me personally, are really fun to watch, even though unfortunately I can't think of a specific one to talk about at this point in time. But like, yeah, it's great stuff. It's awesome. It's a good time. It's a cool experience. But yeah, that's just one little thing, because I mean, it's all about approach. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's cool. So you talked about Lord of the Rings. You talked about Harry Potter and the Ghibli movies.
Mm-hmm.
But like the Ghibli movies, I feel like you say they're soft world building because they're more like fantastical and leave a lot more to the imagination, right?
Yeah.
Is that? But I mean, thinking about it now, a lot of it's based off of like Japanese folklore, right?
Yeah.
All those spirits have some sort of like semblance to stuff that we've already, or not we've, but like stuff that's already been like discussed in like in things like that. Like, okay, what about worlds that are just reimaginations of something? You know, what would you call those? Like a I don't know, like a apocalypse. You know, what type of world building is that? If it's like Mad Max, it's still Earth, but it's Earth 40 years in the future, where fossil fuels are. I actually don't know what the premise of Mad Max is, but like it's still Earth, but it's worse.
There's sand, and it's coarse, and it gets everywhere. That, I mean, as I said, it's all about approach, because I mean, every bit of fantasy or sci-fi world building at the end of the day is contributing to, at least in my opinion, I haven't really seen evidence of otherwise, but like all world building contributes to a story. So I mean, Mad Max creating a world that's sort of like that, that's just a funny recharacterization of one that already exists. It totally depends, because I mean, it could, like, if it was soft world building, they wouldn't go into things like how exactly the world became post-apocalyptic, or like why that all happened. I mean, this, I don't want to go off on a tangent about that too much, but I mean, like, yeah, if Mad Max was a soft world building, then it would probably focus more on, I haven't seen it in case this wasn't obvious. There's multiple, right? Like, there's an old one, then they remade it. Am I correct? They did.
Yeah, you're
okay.
right.
I have no idea how they approached it. I know I never watched it, but if Mad Max was soft world building, then it would probably just focus on the character being confused as all get out as to where they are, and like, same as the audience, like, why are things like this? Why is there sand everywhere? It, like, why is it so coarse? And I keep making episode 2 references. I'm gonna stop now, but like, but yeah, like, that would be a soft world building approach. It's just, you are as weirded out as the main character, like, why is everything like this? And you don't really need answers, because that's not the point. It's more about the atmosphere that's created by the mystery of it all. But I mean, if it was hard world building, then you'd probably have like voiceover guy being like, in a world where blah blah blah, and China and America went to war, like Fallout. Fallout opens with well, most of the games basically have the background of China and America went to nuclear war and blew the crap out of each other. Excuse the poop talk. And that's hard world building. I don't think there's a particular term, or at least I don't know of one. If there was world building that wasn't like completely made up, it was based on a real one. But
what about, okay, if I can continue, what about one at high school, like High School Musical? What kind of world building would you say that is?
Well, again, I've unfortunately I know I've watched them, but unfortunately, emphasis on unfortunately, I have watched them, but I don't remember anything, thank God. I don't know. I have no idea, because I mean, that doesn't really involve any world building in the same way that I do. I see what you're getting at now, where it's like, it's not so much, it's that focus is more on genre. It's not so much fantasy or sci-fi. It's like real world slice of life. What if we had all of these Hollywood actors and actresses, made them to pretend to be high schoolers, and then had them dance to everything that happened? Like, all right, fine, whatever, sure. I mean, that's the whole point of it. That's really all you, like, there's not really much else to it. The world building, you would just need a high school, give it a name, put some teachers in there, and then create characters. But at that point, that's less so world building, and you're basically just skipping all of the funny things. Like, oh, what planet is this on? And oh, what's this? And do the mammals glow? It's like, nah, it's just high school. Let's pick a state, Georgia. High school, Georgia, main character, love interest, teachers, bam, and let's make a story out of it. Like, the little less world building and more storytelling. That's what I would say. So
okay,
it totally depends. It's a case by case thing, but yeah, that sort of thing. I guess you could like make up the 51st state, like a high school in the 51st state of the United States of America. Let's call it the state. Call it the state of Jefferson, and let's just say this high school. Man, what do you want to call the high school, Zach? Do you have a name for the high school? You got a good high school name?
Zach Jose Memorial High School.
Zach Jose Memorial High School. What a lad. And your great-great-grandson is the headmaster. We're going to call him the headmaster, not principal, headmaster. He's the headmaster of Zach Jose Memorial High School. And the main character, Main character. What do you want to call the main character, Zach? Does it have
Mason Brendawig.
Mason Brendawig. Mason Brendawig, who's totally a guy, because that's just how we're doing it. Mason Brendawig. And Mason Brendawig is going on a high school adventure to make a baking soda volcano.
Yes. Yes.
Congratulations, Zach. You've just world built.
Did we just world? We just world built.
I am not following this any further. I don't like it. But yeah. So I mean, and everyone has their specialization. Some people look at researching things like biology and geography and all this other stuff. They think that's dull, and they just want to write. They just want to make stories about Mason Brendawig at Zach Jose Memorial High School in the state of Jefferson in the year whatever. It's like some people just want to do that, and then you have people like me that just detail-oriented people, and I want to create a world, give it a name, and design as much as I can about it. Because I mean, at the end of the day, the best part of world building for me is I'm able to learn about things that I find interesting at my own pace, let my creative juices flow, and at the end of the day, I can look at a big old doc or at a map I made or at a graph I made and just look at it and say, this is pretty cool, I really like it, that was a day well spent. And that's, I mean, I would love it if my job was doing that, but right now, I don't know of any jobs that market to people that like world building, but I mean, it probably fits somewhere. But yeah, that's it.
There you go.
That's the long and the short of it. So,
do you have any advice for new, or like people who want to world build more?
Oh man, we gotta approach this like a National Geographic Kids channel. Like, hello, world builders.
Yeah,
hello,
yeah, exactly.
Fellow world builders. I mean, silliness aside, if you guys want to get into it, start from wherever you want. I started from my starting point was a planet. Let's make a planet. See what happens. Let's mess with it. Let's plug in funny numbers and get even funnier numbers back and see what happens. Or, you know, what's a whole nother approach? Because I mean, if you think about it, there are two approaches to world building. You can start with characters on a small scale, and then build outward from there. Create your characters, create your story, and then build the setting around it. Or you can do what I do and build the setting and put characters into it. Either approach works. It totally depends on the person. But my advice for people that are getting into it, follow what's interesting. Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah.
Ask silly questions. Make whatever silliness you can. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, we're just all trying to have fun and do things that are interesting to us. And at the same time, you get to learn things you didn't know otherwise. If someone was to ask me for some random facts about the planet, I can rattle off probably a good number of them. I already rattled off a few in this. So, yeah, just start with what you like and have a goal in mind. Do you want to create a story out of this? Do you want to do a fun little self-insert power fantasy? If some people are into that, I don't know. Do whatever. Do you want to be Mason Brendawig in Zach Jose Memorial High School in the year 100 in the 51st state of Jefferson? Go for it. Just do whatever you want to do. It's all up to you. Your only limit is your imagination. There you go. Silly. Who said that? That's a quote by somebody. Zach, that's a quote by somebody. Who said
Walt
that?
Disney.
Did he?
Sounds like him.
That sounds like a good many people. Wow. Who's Tony Robbins?
Yeah, I know, I just looked it up.
Yeah. Guy sounds like a crackerjack. But yeah, he's right. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Cool. All right, Mason. Well, yeah, thank you for coming on the pod today.
Well,
this has been good.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You guys got to listen to me ramble about something I find interesting, and maybe you got something interesting out of it. Funny plugs. So
Yes.
if anyone's looking for resources, this runs contrary to whatever any teacher, professor, mother, father, whoever, like this, like everyone has told you not to do this, but Wikipedia is one of the greatest things known to mankind. If you just want some raw facts, if you just want to learn about very basic bare bones stuff, Wikipedia always opens with a nice little introduction into the topic. I mean, I've used Wikipedia to learn about electromagnetism. I used it to look into like combustion, like how does fire work. I've done it for planets in axial tilt. Just, it gives a nice little blurb at the beginning. It goes into a lot of detail, and it has sources that if you don't feel comfortable using Wikipedia, go to the sources. I found a lot of very well fleshed out websites with a lot of cool information just by using Wikipedia sources. Or if you're more of a video person, link in the description below. Zach, wink wink, poke poke, step step. Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
But there's just one YouTube channel I use. It's called Hello Future Me. The guy's a little quirky, but I mean, he goes into a lot of detail about world building and just how to approach world building from somebody who's completely new to it and wants to give it a shot. And he goes into a lot of detail over a lot of shows you'd recognize, like Avatar, like Lord of the Rings. It's a great resource to have if you're more into having somebody tell the information to you, then go find it and read it yourself. The channel, once again, is Hello Future Me, link in the doobly-doo. And yeah, that's all there is to it.
All right, cool. Well, thank you, Mason, and everyone who's listening. You are all awesome, and this has been Every Day with Zach Jose.
Awesome.
All right, bye.
Ciao.